Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. I'm chatting tonight about personal branding, how one develops it, why it's important, and sort of what the steps are with Kylee Renouf. Is that correct? Kylee Renouf?
Renouf, but close
Renouf,
enough.
who comes to us from New York. She is a personal branding and digital marketing expert. She's dedicated to keeping executives, realtors, lawyers, and more people top of mind whenever opportunity calls. Kylee, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, it's great to be here. Super excited.
So tell me, what is a personal brand?
Oh gosh, yeah, a personal brand, it seems to be a massive buzzword these days. And so I like to kind of simplify it by using an analogy with a restaurant example. But before I do that, it's basically what your reputation at scale. So it's
Your
how you
reputation at scale.
yes,
Okay.
yes. So it's how you present yourself online, how you present yourself offline. And people think, oh, I don't have a personal brand, but in reality, everybody does. They just might not necessarily be aware of it. So if everybody has one, you might as well take control of it and kind of control that narrative and perception to your advantage, whatever your goals are. So I in explaining it, I like to use the restaurant example because, say you were going out to eat in downtown Toronto, but you didn't know where to go. So you Googled best restaurants near me and a list of restaurants pop up and you're probably scrolling through them, checking out the reviews, maybe looking at pictures of the food, clicking on their websites, or you're taking it a step further and going to their Instagram page really to get a feel of the ambiance, if you would even like the restaurant in the first place, etc. And then from there, you're making a decision. And you could be the best restaurant in Toronto, but if you're not digitally verifiable, people will not know that. And you really just kind of have to rely on foot traffic or word of mouth to get business. So if you don't have a digitally verifiable restaurant, people can't find you and you're losing business to somebody who is. So the same kind of logic can be applied to people and professionals.
But
Whether
being found is just one thing. One wants to know is, it's a good place to eat, that you got great service, that it's something that other people think highly of, not that it's a place that the health department just closed down.
exactly.
So how do you
Ex-
create that part of your brand personally?
yeah, so I think, you really want to first start by being introspective. And this is something that a lot of people don't really consider when building it. Like, who even am I to begin with? What are my goals?
Oh
What
no, deep questions. Who am
yeah,
I?
right? Right. It's kind of scary. So you kind of have to go inward a little bit and really think about what are my strengths? What makes me different from everybody else out there? Like in reality, I'm a digital marketing expert, but there's probably a million other digital marketing experts out there. So what does Kylee do that's different than everybody else? And how do I approach things in a way that I think is different so and unique? So really diving into that, and even what are your vulnerabilities, what's a part of your journey that you'd like to share that would allow you to relate with your audience on a deeper level,
Why do you
because
want to be vulnerable if you're trying to create a brand?
that's another misconception people have. So like with social media, you think that it really needs to be super polished and highlight real content and putting yourself out there, your best foot forward, but people can only relate to that on a certain level. It really is with that vulnerable, raw, and authentic content that people can connect and build a deeper relationship with you. Like I would so much rather do business with a Fortune 500 CEO who shared their struggles along their journey and how they got to where they are, because that's so much more relatable to me as a young entrepreneur than somebody who's only sharing, I was Forbes 30 under 30, went to an Ivy League school, all of this stuff. So like really kind of sharing the humanness behind the person.
That's interesting. I've always been a believer that people have a signature story, a something or other that happened to them that defines who they are. And when
Mhm.
you're vulnerable enough to expose that story to people, that's when people sort of fall in love with you, grab onto you, get to know you. I did an interview just last week with a real estate agent, quite a successful real estate agent, but she talked about how she grew up in sexual abuse and in foster homes and adoption homes and had real problems, and then was a runaway at age 15, and yet ended up becoming incredibly successful as a real estate agent. And people commented, the story was so much more interesting because of the negative stuff that happened to her, and it made her far more strong and resilient and inspirational. People wanted to do business after she had divulged this vulnerable story.
Right. That is a perfect example. People can relate to that, maybe not directly, but even on some sort of level, so much more than they would be able to relate to. Hi, I'm X realtor that's doing millions and millions of dollars in sales. Look at me. Aren't I great? You should do business with me because I'm successful. But, when they can see kind of that come up story and the struggles behind what it took to get to where they are, you really kind of develop a deeper relationship with that person, whether you actually know them or not.
So let's take a step back, Kylee, and tell me, how did you get into this?
Oh man. So I've been working in marketing since I graduated school, but I've been working in, a variety of different industries. So medical devices, cryptocurrency, all over the spectrum. And it wasn't until about 4 years ago that I started doing digital marketing for keynote speakers and kind of acting as them online and running their social media accounts. And through that, obviously they had a ton of talent, but through doing that and just showing up consistently online and telling their story, they started to get keynote speaking gigs and podcasts and all of these different awesome opportunities, just by building their reputation at scale, like I said. So in building it for other people, I realized, wow, there really is something to this whole personal branding thing that people are talking about all of the time. So I went through the motions myself and was like, but really, I don't know if it's for me. I kind of like taking a back seat and showing up as other people online and being kind of behind the curtain. And I'm a pretty shy and reserved person. So and I'm young. I was 24 at the time. So do people even care what I have to say? Am I credible enough to talk about this? Am I going to get made fun of by my friends? Like I had so many concerns and reservations about building a brand myself. So I didn't do it until very, very recently. And just by pushing through that and building my brand and sharing that vulnerability about my insecurities towards building it, when I was posting about that, that is what really, really resonated with my audience. And I had so many people reach out to me and say, you inspired me to push through and build my brand, or I felt the same way. How do you get through these fears and struggles and everything? And I was started to think to myself, this is apparently something that everybody's facing. It's not just me. So that's kind of what my unique selling proposition was, is that I've been through this too. I understand the struggles. So I want to help you kind of overcome those struggles because I see just a massive return on investment, from building my own brand in the very relatively short amount of time that I have.
How did you get through those struggles?
I think, you know, one, realizing that I wasn't alone in in it, and two, just really kind of reaching out to a community and getting their support and feedback, and realizing that everybody deals with imposter syndrome to some degree, even the most successful CEOs in the world. And just through that, I realized, you know, if everybody's dealing with it on some level, it doesn't seem like it's something that will ever go away. And slowly by slowly, I started to kind of build that confidence muscle by posting online, and I got no likes, no traction, no followers, nothing for the first few months of posting, and just kind of remembering why I was doing it in the first place, and told myself, I'll give it I'll give it 6 months to see if this is something that I want to do. And I went all in on it. And again, by sharing those vulnerable messages and stories, more people eventually started to kind of flood in and tell me that they felt the same exact way. And so I built this community of super supportive people on LinkedIn, that felt the same way that I did. And we kind of just build each other up and support one another. And it really is like a muscle. And over time, I got a little bit less anxious and less anxious to post. And now I'm posting video, which is a whole nother thing. But it's really been like a somewhat linear trajectory in confidence towards building my brand online. But it really started from zero. I'm scared. I don't like this. This stinks.
What a great story. We're going to take a break for some messages and come back in just 2 minutes with Kylee and talk a little bit more about the imposter syndrome and what exactly you need to do to create this brand online at scale, which I think is interesting that every single time we chat about this, Kylee uses the word at scale. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. My guest tonight is Kylee Renouf, and she is chatting with us about building a personal brand at scale. She is a personal branding and digital marketing expert. She's dedicated to keeping executives, realtors, lawyers, and more people top of mind when opportunity calls. And she's got her own very personal, interesting, fascinating story that we've been chatting about. She comes to us from New York, and someone that I followed on LinkedIn, and so somehow you ended up coming into my perception and impressed me, and so that's why we reached out, and we ended up having a chat back in the spring that was kind of interesting, and now we're doing an interview. So Kylee, we just ended up talking about the imposter syndrome, and you said lots of people, if not everyone, has the imposter syndrome, and they have to get over it. What the heck is the imposter syndrome?
So, imposter syndrome, from my definition anyway, is feeling like you're going to be found out as a fraud or that you really don't know what you're talking about. And so that's the experience that I had when I was posting, because in reality there always is somebody that's going to be more knowledgeable in one way or another than you, or smarter, or richer, whatever the case is. And that comparison game makes you feel less than, and like your message doesn't deserve to be heard just because you're, in your mind anyway, less further along than these other people.
And so you had this imposter syndrome. Tell me, why do you think you had this imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough to start from scratch. I mean, I saw success in building other people's brands, but I really did start from zero, aside from my college friends and professors following me on LinkedIn. So I I felt like, there's so many people that are so much further ahead of me in building their personal brands, especially in the digital marketing space. So I kind of was like, these people are the experts. Maybe I should just leave it to the experts. And, you know, I need to learn so much more before I start posting and I'm seen as credible. But then I realized there's always more that you can learn. And it's never ending. Like, you really can just learn forever. So if that's the approach that I'm going to take, I'm never going to get started in building this. And I really don't think that I would ever feel ready enough to start building my brand. So I just kind of went for it. And then through going through it and doing it myself, I think that's been the best way for me to learn what works and what doesn't in building a personal brand. Granted, I had experience building others, but really just on a deep personal level, understanding what it takes to build from zero. Because in reality, a lot of these keynote speakers had a decent sized following, but starting from scratch is a whole nother journey. So it took a lot, but it's been awesome.
So tell me what you did differently for yourself versus what you did for these people that had already had a following that were keynote speakers.
So I think that just I really knew it actually, doing it myself changed my approach and how I do it for my clients nowadays. This was back when I had just started working with the keynote speakers, but the power of vulnerability, I think, is the first shift that I made in posting myself that I now do with my clients. So I really kind of meet with them on a deep level and try to understand and pick their brain on how they got to where they are, and the struggles and the wins and everything that shaped their journey, and then being able to speak about that on their behalf, because I had seen so much success in doing that with mine. And another, I guess, mistake I made early on was being a bit too promotional with these keynote speaker services. You would see success in it, of course, eventually, but at the end of the day, nobody really wants to consume something that comes across as an ad or a I'm so excited to announce that I just got this job. Like there's no fun or there's no story in that. So that's another thing. Like in promoting my services, I don't necessarily say work with me, book with me, like let's do this. I more so take an approach of consistently providing value for people and letting my experience and expertise speak for itself rather than being super salesy. So
Well,
really,
that's really interesting. So you're constantly providing value rather than trying to promote yourself for being super salesy.
yeah, and that has been an absolute game changer, and I've seen more inbound leads in doing that than I ever saw in being very promotional and outbound on these keynote speakers accounts years and years ago. So I really just want to be that source for people and provide education for them on again what a personal brand is, how they should build one, and give them actionable steps that they can take in that moment in time without really expecting anything in return from them. Because I think that people get so caught up in the end goal being the sale that they forget that nobody actually wants to consume something that's an advertisement. I mean, at least personally speaking, I scroll past that and there's no value really in providing that. And it's just it lacks depth. So I think that, people will want to work with you more when you give without expecting anything in return.
You do this primarily on LinkedIn, is that correct?
Yeah, LinkedIn's my main platform just because that's where my target audience is.
Which is what? Business people.
Business people, lawyers, doctors, really really anybody. But then, they might find me on LinkedIn and we might connect in chatting. I might say, "Hey, I think that based on what your goals are and who you're trying to connect with, you might be better suited for Instagram or it might make more sense for you to be on TikTok." It really depends on the person and their goals to build their brand. There's no one size fits all, and what works on one platform might tank on another platform too. So that's something that I really learned kind of through doing too, and was something that we weren't doing early on when I had first started.
And are you posting primarily articles or just comments or videos, as you say, or like what is it that you're actually posting?
A whole bunch of stuff. So I post, like I said, a lot of actionable tips. So things they're called swipe through carousels. So it's basically a multi-page infographic on tips on how to build a personal brand and really taking the guesswork out of it and making it super easy for people to build. Maybe sharing personal stories about misconceptions around personal branding. Of course, the relatable, more personal stories, and then videos that are people's attention spans are obviously shrinking a bit, and everything's kind of pushing towards video. So learning how to create video and really capturing their attention within the first 3 seconds of the video to keep them hooked and explain, you know, I understand the problem that you're experiencing, and here's how to fix it.
And how did you become knowledgeable about all these different techniques?
Lots of trial and error and, just learning from a bunch of different people. I think that there's a lot of marketing principles just from general brand marketing that can be applied to personal branding. So just being a forever student and learning and taking in as much knowledge as possible. And, I'm always listening to podcasts about different social media trends and how to use social media and the changing algorithm, because I really think it's something that you have to stay on top of, and things change. Just a couple of months ago, people were saying do not post video on LinkedIn at any costs, and now they're saying post video, it's the best way to grow, it's the best way to get reach. And so just being able to keep up with that through news sources and the stuff that LinkedIn and Instagram accounts are putting out about the algorithm changes and stuff. So just, taking in a lot of information at once, but then also testing it out myself to see if it actually stands true.
You posted recently that it's all about storytelling.
Mm.
Why storytelling is the secret to building a personal brand? Why?
Yeah, I just think, people stories are relatable. Stories are fun, and the way that I like to write copy like my captions, is identifying a problem and then taking people through all the way to the solution so that they're kind of going along for a journey, and rather than you just, copy and pasting facts or statistics or being super promotional, whatever the case is, by telling a story, people can really buy into your journey. So, for example, if I told a story about, I started with 0 followers and now I'm at 7,000 followers. I felt imposter syndrome, fear of judgment, blah, blah, blah. But then I started doing this, this, and this. And now here's my result. So taking people through that entire story of how I got the result that they might be looking for as well, is a lot more powerful than just, giving people dry, high level information, and really sharing, I've done this for myself. I've done this for my client. It just really helps you connect with people on a much deeper level, and stories are engaging, they catch your attention a lot more. And yeah, I just, storytelling is great, and it can even work in your promotional content.
But it's also storytelling about yourself and the vulnerability, as we were talking about.
Yeah, or what you experience with a client, or a lesson that you learned in life, or something that you recently learned in a book, whatever the case is, just some sort of story. Yeah.
And then another one of your posts was interesting. It said the difference between you and them, they kept going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really big misconception that people have too, is that, you see the Gary V's and the Mr. Beasts and Alex Hormozzi's and the people that have millions and millions of followers, and you're like, I want to be like them. And then you try for a couple of months or even less than that and don't see the immediate result from it, and get discouraged and start going through all of the doubts in your mind of, maybe nobody wants to hear what I have to say, or maybe what I'm saying isn't any good, or whatever the case is, and then they just give up. But Mr. Beast, it took him months, or it took him 100 videos to get over like 10,000 views or something, that, don't quote me on that statistic, but something like that. And it takes creators up to a year, or posting 3 times a day for 8 months. It takes a lot of effort that I think most people don't realize, or just don't prioritize in building it, because it does take so much time, and then they just throw in the towel and say, this isn't for me, let's leave it to somebody else. But really just keep going. And I've been through that myself. I started posting really kind of dry, high level, uninspired, unintentional content for a couple of weeks, and was like, dang, why don't I have 100,000 followers yet? This is hard. And not that it's about the followers, but just, it is a long game, and most people aren't ready for that type of commitment. So um it takes a lot of time.
Now, when you're out selling your services as a personal branding, digital marketing expert, I can understand why you would want to do it. Why would the regular person want to bother spending the time building a personal brand?
The regular person, as in like,
A lawyer, a business person.
yeah, because I mean, same thing, going back to the restaurant analogy too. If I were to look up, you know a doctor near me, or hairstylist near me, or whatever the case is, again, I would look to see, and I actually just did this week with my hairstylist. I am in a new town right now and just visiting, and needed my haircut. Looked up somebody, checked out their social media account, and based on what I saw on their social media account, I didn't want them to screw up my hair. So I found them and verified them based on their expertise that they were sharing online, and ended up giving my dollar to that particular provider because of how they were presenting themselves online, and their expertise that they were sharing. So it can be applicable to, really any industry. A personal injury lawyer sharing how they really understand and relate with your struggles, and, you know, or a doctor doing the same. It really doesn't matter who you are. There's a way to either be a thought leader or post online to get more business. It just really all depends on your goals, but it is for everybody.
You posted something a week ago that I think sort of summarizes this conversation. Building a personal brand is not about looking perfect online. Here's what to keep in mind when building your personal brand. Do show who you really are. People connect with real people, not facades. 2, tell your story. The ups and downs of your path make you memorable and relatable. 3, build real connections. It's not about the likes or followers, it's about meaningful relationships. Don't try to be someone you're not. People can sense when you're not being real. Be you. Over promote yourself. A little self promotion is fine, but not too much can turn people off. And don't ignore feedback. Constructive criticism is an opportunity to grow. I think that's a great summary.
Yeah, that honestly that honestly wraps it up great. Um, yeah,
We're,
definitely.
we're going to take a break and come back in just 2 minutes with Kylee Renouf. Renouf. I apologize. How do I pronounce it?
Enough.
Renouf, I apologize. Kylee Renouf, a digital marketing expert and a branding expert, a personal branding expert, talking about building a personal brand online at scale. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. We're chatting tonight about personal branding with Kylee Renouf, who is a digital marketing expert and a personal branding expert. She has established her presence online. She's given up her full-time job a couple of years ago to do this full-time, and I think it's been very successful. I would highly recommend you follow her on LinkedIn. She posts more than once a day, and it's really interesting content. I've enjoyed reading your posts and watching some of your videos, and so thank you for that.
Thank
So
you.
let's get into the tactics of exactly what one would do if they wanted to build a personal brand. How do you do it? And, maybe use me as an example. If I came to you and hired you and said, I want to build a personal brand, what the heck would we actually do?
Yeah, let's do it. So I guess my first question for you would be, what are your goals? Who are you trying to reach, and what services are you trying to provide for them?
So I have a radio show, and so I'm trying to build up my radio audience. I also distribute it by way of podcasts and on social media and things like that. And I've got a day job, which is the chief operating officer for a real estate development company. And so some of the benefit that I get out of the radio show and the interactions that I get online are that people want to do business with me from either an investment standpoint or from a development standpoint.
Interesting. Okay, so from I so with the COO job, I and understanding kind of how that funnels into your radio show and they kind of complement one another. I would probably recommend LinkedIn being a platform for you primarily to begin with. It's people log into LinkedIn kind of already in that business frame of mind, and they're there to consume thought leadership content. So I think that would be a perfect place for you to start based on what your goals are. If you want to find people in other avenues that aren't necessarily business professionals, then maybe LinkedIn or sorry, an Instagram presence would make sense for that particular goal too. So having a combination of that, but making sure that you are strategic and not just copy and pasting one post from LinkedIn and posting it on Instagram, because that wouldn't work. So your target audiences might be a little bit different based on each platform, but the ultimate goal might be the same.
It's interesting. So I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, X, and so I'm on 5 days a week with my radio show, and I often do political commentary and interviews earlier in the week, and then business interviews in the middle of the week, and then sort of lifestyle, sort of human interest stories on Fridays. And I find that it's interesting. The political ones get the most traction on Facebook or Instagram. The
Mm.
business ones get the most traction on LinkedIn. And the personal ones get the most traction on Facebook. And it's interesting. So, I told you I did this interview of a real estate agent that had this really compelling personal story. I didn't get a lot of traction on LinkedIn about it, but a ton of traction on Facebook about that. And then I'll do a political interview, and often it's Instagram that has the political commentary and followers. So it's like a different platform for different topics. And I guess one of the challenges that I've got from a personal branding standpoint is because I'm on 5 days a week and I do cover everything. I'm not known for just one thing, and I don't want to be known for just one thing because I can't be known for one thing, because if you did just the one thing 5 days a week, you would lose your audience. You
Right.
wouldn't have enough content.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And that is the perfect example of, you talk about so many different topics, and them performing differently on different platforms is exactly the point that I'm trying to make. And there's really no one size fits all, and something might perform super well. Maybe even a personal story might perform a little bit better on Facebook or Instagram, because people are logging into those from less of a business point of view, but then posting, the business oriented content on LinkedIn. They're logging in probably at work, or just in that business mindset. So it is super interesting, and just having that real-time data and continuing to do what's working on each platform is super important as well.
Okay, so then what would you do with me next?
So are you sharing any information on, who you are outside of your radio show?
Um, No, not really. So, I'll do personal stuff every once in a while. And actually, the personal stuff ends up getting a lot more commentary on it. So, one of the things the radio station wants me to do, and I've been doing that, is a lot more personal commentary at the end of the show. So, I'll do sort of my take as a separate little recording. And then they publish it as a separate YouTube video or podcast. And often, people won't listen to the whole interview, but they'll listen to sort of my summary and my take on it, or that's what ends up getting sort of the interest, because it's sort of my personal point of view on the topic, and so that's what I do. And that may not be exposing much of me personally, but it's exposing my own personal points of view.
Yeah, and I think that goes to show people aren't just tuning in to hear from the experts in various fields. They really want to understand your specific take on whatever that information is. And, you know, sharing that in different formats might be of benefit as well. So for example, if you typically post, here's a link to the YouTube video of the podcast I just did, maybe you could try clipping it into a short 30-second clip with a strong hook at the beginning, or even clipping it to the point where you record a different hook to really capture people, and then it goes into that expert opinion. Um, or you could, there's lots of different ways to do it. Maybe it's you learned something from this call that we're doing right now, and instead of posting a video clip of me talking with you, you post a story about something that you learned in the format of, it's just an image, or here are 5 takeaways in an infographic of what I learned about personal branding on this week's episode. So testing out different formats could also be of benefit to see outside of the video content if something resonates a bit more with your audience or it engages them more.
What's an infographic, and how do you produce one?
So an infographic is basically like a one-page graphic with different tips and tricks or how-tos that are super digestible just from looking right at the graphic. Again, you want to make sure that it's not too text heavy. People can understand and grasp exactly what you're talking about from a quick glance. And so you can make those on a thing called Canva. If you don't want to hire a graphic designer, of course, you can do it yourself. Um, or I've seen people even screenshot their notes app with top takeaways from X event, and then it's all of their different lessons listed out in a screenshot from their notes app. So it doesn't have to be anything super crazy and graphic heavy and, you know, like super high production. People really like actually consuming that more raw and realistic, off the cuff kind of information rather than the super high level or super productive produce overproduce content. So that's one way that you could do it without necessarily outsourcing to a graphic designer.
So one of the challenges I have is that my interviews are long form interviews. I go for an hour or an hour less commercial time,
Mhm.
which is a lot of time for people to commit to listen to something. But I get really good. Usually, I get really good content. I've got over 2,000 interviews over the course of the last 3.5 years. Um, some people have suggested I should start turning it into articles. And lots of people are doing the Substack, article
Oh,
writing.
yeah.
What do you think of that? Because, my content doesn't fit into an infographic because, you and I have been chatting for half an hour.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And if you took something from this, like an infographic wouldn't be able to be the nitty-gritty details that we're talking about on this podcast. It would have to be, very short, couple sentence information that people could consume and digest from a quick glance. So a Substack or, I think people use Beehive for their newsletters. Some people do LinkedIn newsletters. I think that that's a great way for people to consume long form content in an entirely different format that might be more preferable to them because some people don't want to listen to video, but they still want to be able to consume all of those different takeaways that you had gotten from the call. Some people like reading more. So I think that that's a great way to take the content that you already have and flip it into a different format and send it out to the masses because again, maybe you get X amount of YouTube viewers, but then you have a massive email list that you can start sending out these newsletters to after every episode. Or at the end of the year, you could say, here are my top 10 favorite episodes and lessons that I learned from these. And people can consume knowledge in that way.
Okay. So let's say I've followed your advice and done some of those things. I've done some infographics and I've done some articles, and I keep posting the videos. What else should one do to create a personal brand?
I think, really just giving kind of a bit of you said that people like to consume when you give your takeaways on whatever your episodes were, and anytime you post something about yourself, people tend to engage with it and it performs pretty well. So that tells me that people enjoy consuming content from you, Brian, in addition to Brian as the professional. So maybe giving, a bit more insight and having some fun with it and sharing, I don't know, events that you've gone to, or if you went to a football game with your family, or just sharing more about who you are as an individual and painting kind of that holistic picture of Brian and all of the different aspects that make you you, will just allow people to relate with you on a deeper level. I think that people think LinkedIn is only for business content and that's it. But again, you want to have a well-rounded personal brand for people to be able to really buy into you as a person.
That's interesting because Friday I did a show where at the end of it for the last 15 minutes I recited a speech that I did, a toast to the bride and groom at my son's recent
Oh,
wedding. And I got a ton of comments on it, which I was surprised at. I did it because I wanted to do it and share with people. But it was sort of at the end of a show on other topics. But I got a lot of interest in people listening to the toast to the bride and groom. And it was
yeah.
obviously very personal.
Yeah, yeah. And that doesn't surprise me at all. And it just tells me, do more of what's working. People like to see kind of an inside peek into your life. And obviously you have a lot of experience. You're a COO. I'm sure that you have a ton of knowledge and expertise in that area, and then have also experienced kind of along your journey of becoming a professional wins and losses and lessons learned the hard way and all of this different information that people would like to consume. Like I like to say share knowledge to and advice to the person that you were 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 years ago, or even who you are now and a lesson that you learned yesterday, because people can really find a bit of themselves in that information. And I'm sure that a lot of people are following you and you're very aspirational to them, and they want to see how you got to where you are and feel a little bit less alone in their journey, and how, it wasn't always wins. And maybe I'm speaking for you, but I would assume that's kind of how life goes. It's not
Never
always
always wins.
never always wins. So I think sharing that information would be awesome, because maybe there's somebody that, really wants to be a COO one day and they follow you and you give them advice kind of from a mentorship perspective, but posting it for the masses. And then they connect with you on a much deeper level than just consuming radio content or articles. It's a little bit deeper than that.
Now, do you do this all online or do you do it in real life as well?
I think you have to do it in real life too. Like you have to kind of they are not separate, you know. It's another thing that I'm making a post on next week is the the product has to also match the post. So you don't want to portray yourself as one way online and then when somebody meets you, you're the exact opposite. And I've seen this with some people, and it just really diminishes what your credibility and your authenticity when you don't match. So you want to make sure that you are presenting yourself in the same exact way online and offline. So I try to, you know, if I'm being vulnerable and sharing my story online, I try to do the same thing in person and really try to kind of mentor and coach people through things and explain to them and lift them up and share the power of personal branding with them in person too.
This has been really interesting, Kylie, thank you so much. If people want to follow you, what's the best way to check you out on LinkedIn and join up?
Yeah. Check me out on LinkedIn. I have a weekly newsletter on LinkedIn too that I want to put on Substack eventually. But yeah, LinkedIn is the best place to find me. And yeah, this has been awesome.
Thank you so much for sharing. I really appreciate it. We're going to take a final break, and I'm going to come back with my own closing that I typically do as a separate recording. But I'm going to ask you if you can hang in and listen to it, and then maybe you can tell me what I did right and wrong.
Awesome. Let's do it.
Okay, let's take a 2-minute break, and we're going to be back in 2 minutes with my concluding comments on personal branding with Kylee Renouf. Stay with us, everyone. Back in 2. Welcome back, everyone, to the Brian Crombie Radio Hour. We've been chatting tonight with Kylee Renouf about personal branding, and I want to end with a couple of thoughts for myself. I did this course as part of my doctorate in business at one point in time called The Theory of Intentional Change. And it really spoke to me because one of the things that was said about personal branding and how critically important it is that you've got to be, as Kylie said, you got to be vulnerable and figure out who you are and who you want to be. And the suggestion was made, which I did, is write your own eulogy. And I thought, my God, that's sort of terrible that you're writing your own eulogy. But the comment was, number one, if you write your eulogy, you're going to write what you think someone, hopefully a friend or a relative, would say about you after you're gone. And if you read it and you don't like it, you know you got to make some changes in life. And or if you like it, that's sort of who and what you want to be thought of. And those are the things that you should be really working on and talking. And so I thought that was really helpful way of thinking about sort of what your personal brand could and should be. The second thing that Kylie and I talked about, which I think is really true, is everyone has a personal story, and trying to figure out what your personal story is. And with Kylie, it was vulnerability, and I think her sort of imposter syndrome and how she got through that. Trying to figure out what that personal story is that's made you who you are is really key. And then trying to, feed that into your speeches, into your posts, into your interviews. I think that, and getting it out there, I think helps you be, as she said, vulnerable, but it's also helpful for you to figure out what those things are that have made you, who you are. And then one last comment, which we sort of touched on at the end, and Kylie's probably got a lot of experience in this in regards to her promotion of people that are doing keynote speeches. But I think it's really important to try to get out there and do exactly what you're doing online in real life. And the best way to do that, and I found in my own business, if you're trying to make contacts and you go to conference after conference after conference, is getting on stage. If you can get on stage, whether it's a keynote or a panel or whatever, people will come to you. And they'll ask you for your opinions. They'll ask for a contact. They'll, exchange business cards, and that's a relationship that will be very valuable for you in business and or in life. And so, therefore, thinking about the ways of getting up on stage and being able to get an opportunity to do what you're doing online in real life with an audience is helpful. What I will end up doing is often then take my on stage speech and redo it online as well, either with a video of what I did or repeating it on online. But getting on stage is key, and you're not going to do it right away. And so, first stage is, ask a question. Second stage is try to get on a panel. Third stage would be try to become a speaker. And some people, you're not going to get on 1,000-person or a 10,000-person conference right away. There's lots of these programs that are just 30, 50 people that are, collecting together and listening to a speech or a Rotary lunch or whatever. Get out and try those opportunities. It builds your confidence fairly dramatically. It helps you refine your your speech, your talk, and it'll build over time. And I think the final answer, as Kylie said, the difference between people who are successful and those that aren't are the people that keep doing it. So keep doing it. Kylie, how did I do as my summary?
That was great. 10 out of 10. And I love the point about, starting with the keynote speeches. You might not start with a TED Talk or a 10,000 stage conference or 10,000 people conference, but starting from where you're at, and if your goal really is to impact people in some way or another, it shouldn't matter if it's 10,000 people or maybe it's two. Like, if that's your goal, then I think go all in on it, and it's a great opportunity to refine your craft. And same thing with posting. You might my posts from a year ago are horrible, but over time and after doing it, you just get so much better. So you can only learn by doing.
That's my show for tonight. Thank you so much for joining us, Kylie. You were great. I remind you, I'm on every Monday through Friday at 6 o'clock on 960 a.m. You can stream me online even from New York at www.saga960am.ca. All my podcasts and videos go up on social media as soon as the radio show goes to air. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Good night.